Around 2012, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I ran into an article that was titled, "Where and Why Are 10 Million Children Dying Every Year?" Now, I've always been a person who was interested in research, but I believe this was the time whereby my interest in looking at childhood malnutrition from a research perspective really came to life. Since then, I've worked as a dietitian in South Africa for 10 years, working on daily basis with not only the children with malnutrition, but also their caregivers. I am currently doing a PhD on the interchange between genetics and childhood malnutrition here at London Metropolitan University. And I speak to you virtually today because I'm currently at a conference in Liverpool where I'll be talking to them regarding the impacts of the built environment on breastfeeding on this very topic. The purpose of today is just for me to go through some of the research that me and my supervisor have been currently doing around the predictors of initial breastfeeding and breastfeeding duration amongst South African mothers. A large proportion of children still die because of inadequate nutrition globally. And when you try to isolate South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, where I come from, the numbers have been estimated to be even higher. One of the key recommendations, according to WHO, when it comes to interventions that fight against malnutrition, you'll find that they recommend breastfeeding for a period of 2 years and beyond. The unique thing about breastfeeding is that it offers benefits for both the mother and the child. And some authors have estimated that universal breastfeeding or near universal breastfeeding rates can save about 800,000 lives annually. In addition to this, 20,000 lives related to breast cancer can be saved annually as well. But this breastfeeding rates globally remain low, despite all these benefits of breastfeeding being well researched. We'll take South Africa, for example. When we look at children that are breastfed at 2 years, we find that only 13% are breastfed at this age group, compared to 80% of children that are initiated on breast milk on the first day. So as you can see, there's a 67% difference between these two time periods. In this study, we aim to explore the factors that affect breastfeeding maintenance amongst mothers and children in South Africa. Next, we will now explore how we went about in conducting this study. We obtained data from a public surveillance database called DHIS. This database actually is nice because it houses data for more than 90 countries, most of them from low income and middle income countries. The other nice thing about it is that it uses validated tools and standardized procedures. So it's very good if you want to compare yourself against your peers. For us as low and middle income countries, the data that we used was collected, the fieldwork for it was done in 2016, and more than 11,000 households were surveyed, of which 8,514 were women of childbearing age. We looked at another similar study in our region to find relevant predictors for our study. We attempted to find out whether socioeconomic status mattered when it comes to duration of breastfeeding. We wanted to know if the number of times these mothers attended an antenatal clinic also had a role to play in terms of how long they breastfed. We looked at their age. We looked at whether singleton versus mothers who gave birth to twins mattered when it comes to how long these mothers breastfed for. We also look at the facilities where this birth took place and whether initiating breastfeeding within the first hour actually resulted in longer duration of breastfeeding. A bit of background on the data. We included about 1.6 mothers at child pairs in the final data analysis. Most of them initiated breastfeeding within the first hour. Most mothers breastfed for a period of about 10.4 months, and most actually attended antenatal clinics more than 4 times, which is the minimum amount of recommended antenatal visits by the WHO. Okay? And one of them was that higher socioeconomic status resulted in shorter breastfeeding duration. The place where these mothers gave birth also mattered, with those who give birth in private facilities actually breastfeeding for a shorter period compared to those who give birth to a public or government facilities. We then saw that early initiation of breastfeeding within the first hour was actually predictive of shorter breastfeeding duration. When it came to the number of times these mothers actually visited antenatal care, we found that increasing number of visits for antenatal care predicted shorter breastfeeding duration as well. In terms of age, those were under the age of 20 and over the age of 49 actually struggled the most to maintain breastfeeding. And finally, mothers of twins actually appeared to stop breastfeeding earlier compared to mothers of singleton babies. I will now take our data or our results and try to compare the data available out there to see what it means. And hopefully I can end with what can we all do to contribute towards the fight against childhood malnutrition. First of all, it is clear from our data that increasing socioeconomic status resulted in shorter breastfeeding duration. When we checked data for this, we found that in low and middle income countries, our results were in line with them. But compared to high income countries, the opposite is true. In high income countries, you will find that increasing socioeconomic status results in better breastfeeding rates. We also closely related to this, we looked at the place where these mothers were giving birth at. And in South Africa, what you find is that those who are able to afford insurance premiums, they give birth in private facilities. And those who do not afford insurance premiums, they give birth in the government facilities. And here we found that those who gave birth in private facilities actually breastfed for a shorter time as well. And it links back to our first point above that increasing higher socioeconomic status in low and middle income countries results in shorter breastfeeding duration, contrast to what happens in high income countries. Breastfeeding initiation within the first hour is one of the WHO's official recommendation. And the idea is that the sooner the baby attaches to the breast, the sooner the bonding can take place between the mother and the baby, resulting in successful breastfeeding. In our results, however, we found that early initiation was associated with shorter breastfeeding duration. Obviously, we were curious why that is. So we went back to look at some of the data. We found that we were contrasting to some of the data they've collected in Ethiopia, and then we went to analyze those studies. And one of them, we found that their population or their sample was comprising mostly of rural area women, while our study was more of an urban area dominant in terms of the makeup. And what we found was that in terms of urban areas, because of easier access to things such as facilities or higher level of care, those things, they make urban area women more likely to initiate breastfeeding earlier compared to rural area women. But, however, we found that in our research that urban area women in general are more likely to stop breastfeeding at a shorter or more likely to breastfeed for a shorter time compared to rural women. So that might have been the reason behind our surprising results. Closely related to early initiation as well. So we then went to look at the number of visits that these mothers made to health facilities during their pregnancy. And what we found was that the higher the number of visits, actually the shorter the breastfeeding duration, which was also surprising because one assumes that when these mothers they visit the health facilities more often, then that's where they will get the education on the benefits of breastfeeding. So this was surprising as well. But then we went to look at the data and we found that in our region, especially, our results actually concurred those of other authors. And it's mostly related to what we've talked about previously in terms of access for urban mothers and our study area or our study sample comprising of mostly urban mothers. In South Africa, some research have found that urban mothers particularly are more likely to utilize antenatal clinics or antenatal care compared to rural mothers. Some data from Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, my region, has actually supported these findings. So that is when we realized that this might be why we found these surprising results. We found that being younger than 20 was actually predictive of you likely to stop breastfeeding earlier than your older counterparts. And when we looked at some research on this, we found that it's due to a variety of reasons, such as the mother going back to school, mothers not having time or enough time to actually maintain that bonding, that breastfeeding with their child, and a lot of other factors related to these mothers still growing in terms of maturity and trying to find themselves as mothers in this new environment they find themselves in. And perhaps not surprising, we found that mothers of twin babies actually really struggle compared to mothers of singleton babies when it comes to maintaining breastfeeding. I think this one was a bit of an obvious because we know, everyone knows the challenges of trying to maintain breastfeeding. So then, how do we promote breastfeeding for a period of up to 2 years to try and save those 800,000 plus children I was talking about earlier when I started this presentation? First thing I think we need to understand is that breastfeeding maintenance is a complex issue with a lot of factors involved in it. So definitely more research is needed in this area. This one, for those professionals who are involved in education, we think messages towards urban mothers should be more focused on how to maintain breastfeeding once you start, because they seem to initiate breastfeeding easily, but messages towards rural mothers should be more towards how to initiate, because this group seems to find maintaining breastfeeding easier compared to the urban mothers. The third thing is in terms of age and mother of twins. We think younger mothers and those who give birth to twins need extra support when it comes to maintaining breastfeeding. And what we've found is that in terms of socioeconomic status, whether you're from a high-income country such as England or USA, or you're from a low and middle-income country, socioeconomic status matters when it comes to breastfeeding. It just has opposite effects, where you'll find that in low and middle-income countries, socioeconomic increasing actually decreases duration of breastfeeding, but in high-income country, increasing socioeconomic status results in better breastfeeding rates. So what this means is when we use proxies, we need to be very careful because they can mean different things depending on the population that we're using them on. I have now come to the end of my presentation, and my supervisor, Dr. Unafebrada, will take your questions since I'm in Liverpool and not able to take them in person. Stay strong, London Met.